Hello, and welcome to another Noman live stream. My name is Chris. First off, if you're looking for closed captionings, make sure to head over to our YouTube or our Facebook page. We have closed captioning there. Next, we would love to thank our sponsors, NVIDIA and Dell. Without them, we wouldn't be able to provide you such amazing live content as we're doing right now. Before we get into everything, and there's a lot to get into, and I'm very excited about today, just as a heads up, if you have any questions during the panel as we're discussing, go ahead and put them in the chat ahead of time. So that way, when we get to the Q&A, we'll have a bunch of questions to pull from. Sometimes people wait until the questions are being asked, but go ahead and put them ahead of time. We have our amazing mod in the back. They'll definitely pull the questions and put them all in one place for you for safekeeping. Now, that all being said, all of that out of the way, thank you all for joining us for an exciting live stream today with VFX Supervisors behind Fast X as they discuss the visual effects of this high-octane blockbuster feature. Now, I know that is quite a proclamation, a statement, but just after looking at what we just saw, and if you haven't seen anything in the Fast franchise, you know that these movies, I mean, they're what I like to call popcorn poppers. You're sitting there and you're just going through it and you're really, really enjoying it. One of the reasons why you're having such a great time watching it, at least for me, is a lot of the visual effects. It's just so fun to watch all of these amazing things happen on screen, so much so that a lot of times when I'm watching it, I don't even really remember that I'm watching visual effects. I'm just like, man, I don't wonder how much it costs for two oil tankers to crash into each other. We're thrilled to welcome some of the biggest VFX studios in the industry who will take viewers, through the process and workflow exploring the film's key sequences and challenges. Again, we saw some of that already, but we're going to break it all down while we're here. So remember, if you have any questions, make sure to ask them now. In addition to breaking everything down and going through each one of these pieces, we're going to talk a little bit about them individually and just kind of deep dive a little bit more into them and their journey, and then get to the nitty gritty of all this stuff. So without further ado, let's start inviting some of these awesome panelists here. Oh, look, we got them all right here. How are you all doing? So we have as they're all littering the screen right now, we have Peter Chang, Alex, Jesper, Hugh, and Paul. Welcome all to the Noman live stream. Thank you all for being here. Very, very excited to have you. Peter, why don't we start with you? Why don't you let us a little bit, so your production, VFX supervisor, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, how you got from A to Z, and then how you got to work on this amazing film.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I really started, my sister kind of went to school with Tony Barwick's daughter. And Tony Barwick was a scriptwriter. He wrote scripts for Thunderbirds and a lot of Jerry Anderson series. So he introduced me to Derek Meddings after I kind of finished art college. And I went along to an interview at Friday, 3 o'clock, and it was on a feature film called Krull. And by 4 o'clock, I was sitting in the producer's office, and he was kind of asking me how much money I wanted because I started work on Monday. So that's kind of my real intro to the film industry. I started work on Monday, and my first job was doing animation morphs of all the animals on Krull. So the rest is history. That's how it started.
Very cool. Cool. Quite the Hollywood story, I must say. So then moving on from you, we got Alex as well over here. You're also a VFX supervisor. Why don't you give us a little bit on insight on you and a little bit of a story? I'm sure it's just as smooth as Peter's was.
It was, believe it or not, it was.
Oh, really?
No, it was. So my time goes back to. I come from architecture background and civil engineering, and passion for computers and art and 3D came from that. And and originally from Belgrade, from Serbia, but life moved me to London. And before I moved, I knew pretty much everything about the facilities in London, and then we talk about 99, 2000, something years ago. And then after going around and just trying to see and meet people, and so I ended up securing an interview at DNEG with Mr. Paul Franklin. And I just showed up because I had a job in architecture. I just showed up in a suit with a tie and stuff, with my portfolio. And the first question was if I missed the office, if I was looking for someone else, because he turned up in a flip-flops and the shoe. And after the quick chats and the backgrounds and showing some work, he just asked me to just come in on Monday. I'll see you here.
Now, did he tell you to come in on Monday with flip-flops to change the shoes, or?
I did indeed, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Ever since I forgot about the tie and the suit, so the flip-flops are still around.
That's a pretty cool workspace. So then, continuing on from Ghost VFX Supervisor, we also have Jesper. How are you doing? And why don't you give us a little insight as well? I mean, you're following two pretty great stories, so I'm very excited to hear yours.
Yeah, but you're gonna find a thread here. We're a little bit connected. So I came to London as well in '97, and the first film I worked on was supervised by Peter, and it's one of my favorite shows ever, The Borrowers. I recommend anyone to just watch that movie. It's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, we ended up at Double Negative. I'm going to correct you there, Alex. It's not DNEG, or it wasn't when we started. It was Double Negative. Yes. Yeah, we've basically spent our working lives together. And this, as we move on to Hugh and Paul, they can continue the story.
Well, Hugh and Paul, I think that's a better lead-in than any. Why don't you go ahead and fill in the rest for us?
I mean, mine's a little bit less dramatic. I guess a bit more traditional. So I guess I started down the university route. So I went to uni to study computer animation at Bournemouth. And then from there, I went to DNEG, obviously with a lot of these guys. I think, again, my first show there was doing Match Move on Stardust, which was a Pete Chang show again. So known Pete since I first started working at DNEG. And then I was at DNEG going down basically down a generalist route. Double Negative, going down a generalist route. So I did a little bit of animation, bit of effects, mainly lighting, and then sort of worked my way up through sequence supervision, CG Soup, VFX Soup. And then, yeah, like I said, I was there for about 16 years, and then I moved recently to a new company, Bello, where I've been for almost 2 years now, I think. But yeah, obviously still close ties with people I've worked with over the years.
And then lastly,
over to me, I guess. So when I was younger, I didn't really grasp that you could work in VFX. It wasn't really a thing for me. But when I left school, I decided that out of interest, I would do computer animation at uni. So a similar route to Hugh, really. And it was just super exciting for me, telling a story with images and breathing life into something you created yourself. So my first step was slightly different. I went in to a small post-production company running at first. So that's kind of making teas, coffees, lunch, that sort of task. From there, I worked my way into the CG department. And I actually started along a production route and was kind of working as a PA with a small group of artists alongside great producers and supervisors. And I continued along that path and always tended to find myself in the screening room, listening to supervisors' discussions with artists and clients, focusing on the artistic and technical aspects of shots. And I kind of just hit at the right point because streaming TV was taking off at the time. So lots of productions were in progress, and I had the opportunity to go on shoots alongside the supervisor. And occasionally I got to cover for the supervisor and do the data wrangler duties. And being part of the shoots really helped me understand the decisions that were being made before shots go to us in the studio. From this experience, I was lucky enough to start supervising smaller TV and smaller TV shows. And after that, I focused on the supervisor role. Joined ILM in 2019. I've supervised both film and TV, and day to day, I love it that I get to work with talented artists and production teams discussing and making creative work. So slightly different route to the other guys, but just as fulfilling, I think.
I mean, it's all different paths, but y'all came. You're very much like the Avengers, or the Justice Friends, or even people from the Fast and Furious franchise. If you've all ever seen that, different walks of life coming together. We do have a couple of questions coming in here, so we're gonna tackle some of these for y'all. There's one specifically for you, Hugh, and I know you kind of have the answer. Someone was asking if you specifically studied arts at university in Bournemouth, and then I have a follow-up question to that as well.
It was the main Bournemouth uni, not the Arts Institute. They had a course on, at the time it was called Computer Visualization and Animation. So it was a mixture of sort of maths, computing, tech with some artistic painting, drama sort of thing. It was a nice balance of both. But yeah, helped lead on the generalist course, which was good.
And so that leads to my next question, which is some of you as a career path, you kind of were on one track, and then you did this, and there might be some similarities in what you were doing before to what you're doing now. How did you mentally prepare yourself for such a shift? And then going from working on something like you said, you were in architecture, for instance, and then working on feature films. I mean, it's got to be a shift. And then how do you deal with that?
Well, honestly, I never felt there was a shift. Obviously, the aspects of filmmaking and visual effects, the things that I never learned about through our official and more traditional channels. And that's something I dedicated myself on the side while I was learning about 3D and stuff. But the art is art. I think when it comes to what we do, it's essentially it's just an art. And whether you understand the art in architecture, whether you understand the art in different forms of art, in this case, visual effects and filmmaking, it comes down to the same matrices to evaluate something. So in that sense, I felt very much at home when it comes to doing the visual effects, because at the end, it's a product. It's a visual product that someone either likes it or it doesn't, or it's guided by certain boundaries and the vision.
So then, well, first, is there anything anybody else would like to add to that? All right. So then I'll go to my next question, which obviously some of you know each other and have known each other for quite a while. Do you feel that working in a team, visual effects reviews, I guess, your dailies, do they get easier because you're friends, or are they a little bit more difficult because you don't want to give certain feedback? Or do you have that distinction of like, no, when we're at work, we're work, and when we're outside of work, it's this?
That's definitely one for Pete.
No, I think it makes it a joy. I think to work with people who have, come up through the ranks and you've seen them blossom, like these guys, blossoming and doing their own shows and getting on. I think it makes it easier. You've already got a shorthand, and you could be totally honest. Like, I can look Jasper in the eye and say, that doesn't look very good, Jasper. We got to try that again. And
my name is Jasper, right? It's not Jasper.
Yeah. It just kind of makes it easier. And so there's a shorthand, and I think everybody knows the kind of standard that you want to reach, in the presentation. And I think they're so good, these people on this panel, that they hit it. And most of the time I'm just saying, yep, I'll show this to Louis, and he'll approve it. So they're that good now.
But only because they were it's because of your tutelage that they've succeeded so far.
I think they've worked on hundreds of shows between them. I think they've managed to glean a lot from the VFX world, meet a lot of supervisors, see how they do it, and then make their own path. I think that's important, their own kind of distinctive style. And, I think that's a great thing that they, cross-germinate between supervisors, see how they all do it. I mean, I've loved every show, meeting new people and seeing how they present and what they think is good and their aesthetic. I think it's important to kind of mix it up,
Yeah, I trust you in talking about the aesthetic and the visual look. I think it's no better time than to transition into what we all came here for, is some in-depth looks at some of this stuff. So I believe, Peter, we're going to start with you, and you're going to walk us through some pretty awesome stuff. Again, for everybody watching right now, don't worry, your questions, we're logging them over to the side. So keep bringing in those questions. We're going to get back to another Q&A after we go through some of this stuff. But I mean, I'm excited. I'm ready. So Peter, please take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Look, I just want to thank Noam for inviting us to speak about the VFX on FastX. I'm going to talk a little bit about our VFX methodology. And as I said before, I always encourage people who are starting off in the VFX world, excuse me, to work with as many supervisors as they can, to gain as much perspective and to see how they handle films, as everyone has their own way of doing things. I mean, I've always been curious about how other supervisors approach a job, and I'd love to have been a fly on the wall on some of their sessions. At one time, I even thought about applying for a job as Dennis Muren's assistant, because I thought it would just be awesome to see how he approached his films. FastX, as you know, was directed by Louis Leterrier. In my career, I've been very fortunate to work with only nice directors, and Louis falls firmly into that camp. As you can see he has a wide experience of VFX, which actually makes the job easier. Somebody who's experienced a large shot count is kind of familiar with the milestones you kind of need to reach in order to deliver the film. So this is kind of my basic philosophy that I follow each time I accept a film. And that's to try and execute his vision under the circumstances. And if he doesn't know, you need to design it for him. As a supervisor, if you want to make it, you have to contribute and you have to solve problems. You need to be able to push the creative so that everything is the best that it can be, obviously in the time allowed. My right-hand lady, and a relationship that is so important, I couldn't have done the job without her, Karen Murphy. With all her years of experience handling all, on various films, she handled all the jobs I couldn't do. The budgeting, the scheduling, the hiring of staff. So she was glued to me throughout the whole of the production, solving all the problems as a team. And, it was great because we got to examine a problem from two different perspectives. My left-hand lady, and just as important, is Jennifer Bell, who is our connection to Universal and all the executives. She approves everything we do in the VFX department. And what's great about Jennifer is that she came from being a VFX producer on numerous films and knows what we're going through every day and is an extremely supportive person. And so sometimes you need to just bring in a strong voice to make people listen. And she was it. The rest of my amazing team, these fine people, tell me where I should be and at any time. In post, they run my life, keep me awake at Starbucks. And, one of the things I always try and do is keep the process fun. And like I was saying before, what's great about each person is that they've all worked on other shows and they bring their skills and experience together, to make our show even better. There's absolutely nothing like learning off each other. So everything starts from the script. I'm going to break it down into 3 stages. And most of the time, the script is still being rewritten and not kind of ready. But the work has to start. And the most exciting part of the process is that we slowly begin to see Louis's vision. The art department are laying out the sets, what parts will be built, and what is going to be left to VFX to complete. Now, previs and storyboards kind of fall into 2 camps: as a loose guide for the sequence, or very tight with specific examples of cameras. And there's two versions here that I've got. One for the Rome Bond sequence and one for the Dam sequence. You'll see how they differ just in their quality. Even when the completed sequences are done, it's constantly being revised. And so we always have to give flexibility to the process of the shooting of the sequences. Sequences can be complicated and combine different locations. And it's our job to advise them as to how to shoot the shots. All the while in the background, we work out what we need in terms of plates, LiDAR, and photo textures. We're the last to touch the shots, so it's important to make sure that it's shot correctly. After talking with Louis to determine what is required, it's important that the producers be in sync with the methodology, as they're the ones that kind of green light the whole process. Steve Winden, the DP, we discuss what cameras we're going to use, what format, and we talk a lot about the lighting so that we can seamlessly match what second unit and apply that to the blue screen foregrounds that we're going to shoot later on. We always try to shoot the plates first, as it's easier to control the lighting on the blue screen, just with an actor in a car on a gimbal rig. And with Jan, the production designer, it's important to understand the aesthetic design of the film so that when we do our set extensions, they don't look out of place with what he's designed throughout the film. We always try and do things physically, but the audience's appetite usually requires a mix of various techniques, and that's kind of Alistair's kind of job. Actors with stunts, safety is paramount on a shoot, and so the use of digital doubles is common. Actors are obviously substituted with stunt people, and the whole process is stunt previs. We look at it and we talk to Olivier to determine what will be the real actor and what will be the stunt person. Andy and Jack Gill, let me talk to you about those guys. They're kind of veterans of the Fast franchise. They are experts in what can be done with a car. They are the first people to talk anything to do with cars. We together will break down a shot and usually arrive at the most achievable physical part of the stunt. And a lot of time on location with big stunts, we're normally only budgeted for 1 take. But even if that goes wrong, it's a great reference for us. So here are some examples of what Alistair would be working on. the ball rotating like a spinning ball hitting a cushion on a pool table was something I was very keen to emulate in the Rome bomb sequence. And as you can see from the wire rig, it's a very controlled way that Alistair is doing it. So, but the destruction is always good to try and get physically. We also, to aid Louis and the special effects team, the VFX would start its own R&D. Working with Andy and Jack, we break down the parts of the shot to do with a real car and the parts that we would bridge either side with CG takeovers. So the tests are really there to help inform Alistair what movements we're kind of looking for in the animation of the sphere bomb. And then we kind of make a decision as to what physical way we'll go about doing the shots. As well as the kind of creative discussions, there are many meetings and tech scouts to determine our countries to shoot. That's what's great about the Fast franchise. It's a joy to work on something that is so international. So we went to 8 different countries. Leavesden served as the main studio and backlot. Rome, obviously for the Rome bomb. Portugal, we closed a A24 highway, much to the anger of the locals. Spain, we had the dam, which served as, Louis really liked the dam, the photographs of the dam he saw. Iceland doubled up for Antarctica. The original Fast 5 was shot in Puerto Rico, so we went back there and got a load of plates. Beautiful Rio, served for the favelas and the Rio race. And LA, as always in the franchise, the Toretto House, Cypher's Lair and Jacob's Journey. So with all the different locations, there's no way you can be present in every shoot. That's why the team that you're hearing about, that are on this panel, the amazing supervisors on this panel, come on board and look after specific parts of the shoot. Usually, they're the sequences that they'll be working on in post, so they get a heads up about the work that will be needed. And along with the supervisors, there's a team of brilliant data wranglers at each location. And together they gather all the material needed to complete the work in post. So being lucky enough to kind of work on Fast 9, Fast 10 enabled me to improve certain areas I felt could be better. I'm going to talk about 2 of them, just because we're limited on time. The camera array. So crucial to the franchise are the shots involving the actors driving the cars. A camera array captures the background for a particular car in a location, so that you can use it to fill in the blue screen. The basic improvements were, we went from Fast 9, from a 9 camera rig to a 12. We went from Arri Minis to Arri Mini LFs, so we were a larger format. We got a better stabilized head with the Apex head. We actually managed to stabilize 12 cameras. We were faster at transfer heights, and I'll go into that a little bit more. But Alan Paddleford rigged an amazing crane system similar to NASCAR technology to change the height of the rig super quick. We had a better video system called Stitchbox, which was created by the company Brownian, who provided the camera array. So here's a static view of 360 degrees through all 12 cameras. The red lines in the picture show the capture of each individual camera and the overlap with the adjacent cameras. And when it's running, this is kind of what you see. This is actually a quick time of Stitchbox. You'll see that was created by Brownian. So every vehicle in the scene is shot using the array vehicle. So if we got 4 cars, we would do 4 array takes, 1 in each car. And the car that we would be playing, say it's Dom's car, we would substitute that out for the array vehicle, but the other 3 cars would be driving around. This means that Louis gets the flexibility to cut to any actor driving at any moment in the sequence. But each vehicle has a different head height. So we always adjust the rig to maintain the driver's correct eye line. So if we got a truck, we need to get it up 9 feet. So hence the reason why we needed to be really quick with the transfer. And we only ever get to do the array vehicles at the end of the take. So we're always chasing the light because we want it in the same lighting conditions as we shot the initial second unit footage. So it's no good thinking, oh, we'll just come back the day after and shoot it about 3 o'clock because the lighting may be different. So we always try to get it at the same time. The second area I just want to talk about that we made real vast improvements in was motion control. We're always looking to blend the second unit photography into the main unit photography, going from a location into a car to show the actor and then back out. From a technical standpoint, we also wanted to be faster and more accurate with our motion control setups. The clip you see formed the basis for our test. It was shot wild on a non-repeatable crane, and then the shot was tracked and fed into a motion control rig. On the left, the data from the original track shot fed into a motion control camera and set up into another location. And that's why we've got the mix and overlay to show what the original shot was, to see how accurate our translations were. The idea being that we can shoot a shot in one of our locations and reproduce it with tracking back in Leavesden Studio. Look, the clip on the right shows the same track move, but this time the rotations are left to a special effects gimbal. So one of the advancements was being able to throw one of the axes onto the gimbal so that if we were limited in space, if we needed to turn a corner, we could do that translation on a gimbal against the blue screen rather than have to physically move the camera too far. So here are some clips of the test shot that takes place driving down the dam. And I thought this was fun just to show, well, Paul's beautiful work, really, kind of what he started with. So there'd be blue screen all around the car, but as you can see, there's no roof, there's hardly anything on the car, and the people are moving around all over the place. So the shot is a testament to Paul and his team for the incredible work he did on the shot. So in post, we had 12 companies working around the clock to complete the work. Just to let you know, my post day could have been 24 hours, as the companies are spread all over the world and would always have questions and shots to look at any time of the day. And also, slotted between all the VFX company reviews, I would need to present to Louis to obviously get his notes. So the days in post were pretty hectic. The numbers. We did 3,048 shots in 25 weeks for Fast 10. We actually worked on 3,500. There are a few casualties hitting the cutting room floor. And that's kind of my brief overview of, the VFX on 10.
Well, That was amazing. There are a few questions that came in, but just to say, I know you're very humble, but that was very impressive and a very good breakdown, I must say. But just to start, we have a couple of questions. For the animatic that you were showing, for your team generally, at what stage are you starting that animatic when you initially get the script? And then how long does it usually take that? Because you were saying that the script is obviously going to change. So sometimes, you'll probably have to change, that animatic if they were like, all of a sudden there's two bombs or whatever. So for timeline for you, how long does it take to produce something like that? And at what point in the in kind of the production timeline do you get started on that?
Yeah, so I'm roughly on production probably about 1.5 to 2 years. And the first 6 months really are, the time that we generate the previs. And that even works even through while we're shooting. So we'll get updates on location of designs and spontaneous reactions that Louis has to previs. So the second unit where I am shooting most of the hard stuff on the VFX, we'd scramble around and adjust the shooting schedule according to the previs that we get. So the process never stops. And I think that's healthy because it means you're getting the best out of what, we want out of the location. And the writers and Louis get time to really think about what they want with the editors. So that's why I was saying very early on that our process needs to be that fluid in order to give give Louis his space in order to react to kind of what he's seeing. But all in all, I guess each sequence probably takes in the region of around 3 to 4 months, and there'll be version 20s editorially, because obviously once the shots get done, they get handed over to editorial. They'll cut them together. And then Louis will see it. I'll talk with Louis and the editorial team. We'll make changes. We'll all inject ideas. So, it's the fun time of the show where, we're kind of just making that up as we go along.
Well, a lot of times creatively, I mean, even for me when working here at Nomen, the collaboration is very fun. It's one of the best parts of being a creative, I did have a specific question about, you had mentioned that you talked to the stunt coordinator and talking about in which scenes in previs the actor's going to be in it, and then which scenes the stunt coordinators or the stunt person will be in there. Can you explain kind of the thought process of why that's so important? I'm assuming it's for camera angles, so you don't necessarily have to show the face here, but over here you do. Or is there something more deep within that? I'm just curious about that specific avenue of your work.
Yeah, Charlize Theron, she's an amazing actor, and she could do a lot of stunts herself. But there comes a point where Louis wants something a little bit more, and it becomes dangerous for her to do it. So safety is kind of paramount. I mean, she will always, put a hand up and say, "Hey, I want to have a go." But, it's Olivier's kind of call to say, we don't want to hurt Charlize. So, can you sit this one out, and we'll get a stunt actor to do it. So that's usually what happens. And then the team come in and say, "Hey, we got to give it the idiosyncrasy of Charlize," So that's why digidoubles come in. That's why motion capture, that's why we do all those other things.
Yeah, I applaud anybody who's willing to do their own stunts, but boy, sometimes I think I don't know. I don't think I could muster up the courage. Okay, well, thank you so much for that insight. I think we can move on or continue on with our panel here and speak with Alex. Alex, I believe you have some really awesome stuff to show us.
Yeah, we're gonna start with the beginning of the first sequence in the movie called the Rome sequence. So James, if you don't mind, let's just roll the footage and I will follow up. Hybrid version between few locations, all merged into one. So this was a quick overview of the Rome beats, and then we can now just share another beat, which is the part of the third act.
Alex, real quick, we weren't able to hear a lot of that breakdown that came through as the video was playing.
Okay.
So if you could kind of walk us through it again. First and foremost, I mean, it was very fun to just watch as a whole. I think it might have been hard for me to process it and listen at the same time. So I'm kind of glad that it's coming a little compartmentalized like this. So there was a lot of amazing stuff that we saw there. So could you kind of break it down from start to finish, the bomb rolling down and all the places?
No, of course, yeah. I joined the show in pre-production with Peter, so we had I was lucky enough to have 6 months before we started shooting. So I went through this prep with Peter, understanding what the work is and how we're gonna approach it, and he was feeding me with this information that he was discussing with other heads of departments and so forth. So there was a lot of prepping before we approached the shoots. And the Rome, it was very clear that he wasn't. They couldn't shoot it all in one location. And he was approached from an angle that certain things were shot in Rome and certain things were shot in Turin. We split the work by Peter going to the location with another supervisor who was helping there with everything else, and that was to deal with the plates. And then all those plates were taken then back to London, where I was staying with the first units and shooting and looking after the blue screen elements that were used for composing these final shots.
I see. And then composing a lot of this stuff, I mean, it looks phenomenal as we can see here, but generally timeline wise, what are you looking at for just this sequence that we're seeing right here? How long does something like this generally take?
It was the assets were starting developing while we were still on set shooting. So as soon as the prop department was finished with the look of the bomb, and Peter was shooting it down in Rome, we picked up some references, and the asset department was getting on with building the charger, the vehicles, the bomb, and building certain aspects of the set extensions based on available data that we had at the time. And as we wrapped up the shoot, sometimes in that would be end of August, then there was a shot production starting with all of this, and it took from early September till the very end of the show, which was mid-April this year. So you're looking at a good 6, 7, 8 months of, no, of course, not every shot was taking 6, 8 months, but the whole beat took about 6 months to from the beginning to the end.
I mean, again, I know you all are very humble, and 6 months may seem like a decent amount of time for y'all, but if you give me 6 years, I don't even know if I could actually, if you gave me the ball in real life, I don't think I could film this. So it's still very impressive. It seems like we have our audio figured out a little bit. So
Okay.
if you wanted to talk about this, or we can move on to the next clip, which is the highway sequence.
Sure,
And you'll be able to talk on that.
Carry on with this or move on. Yeah, the highway. So this was shot in Portugal. There was another supervisor with Peter down there, Francois Lambert. He's based in Montreal, and so they were looking after shooting all the plates and choreography and making sure that we get the ingredients to do the visual effects later. I think if you approach it from like these are just ingredients that you can use to paint your picture. And then this was always, again, just went back to London where we shot the blue screen elements. You can see that every location needed some alteration, and this is where it comes to the storytelling again. What is that you're trying to say and tell the audience? To the limitations of physical locations and what can be done and what can't be done, and how can we help the physical, the plates with additional CGI alterations. You can clearly see from the breakdown, what Peter was talking about, the safety issues and why certain things are done the way they were done, because something is just too dangerous for anyone to do it, and certain things just couldn't be possible. Whether you couldn't just have the hill in a location or something else, or whatever the reasons are. This was the other beat again. So I was shooting this in London, but this was again just all done in sync with Peter and what he was shooting down in Portugal. And what's very important to think about with this stuff is the light direction and orientation of your sun when you shoot in place. It was we constantly in touch with each other every day. He would shoot something, and then you get this from the brand and this company who accommodated this amazing array rig that Peter just demonstrated. So I would be getting the quick times of that, and then sitting down with Steve Vinton in London, who's a DOP, and just understanding where's the sun in relation to the driver, and what is the shots, and how are we going to orient the lighting rig on sets and the blue screen. So these are the stuff that you really need to keep an eye on, and the importance. You can clearly other stuff still here that the combination of, despite using the real helicopters in plate, they were just used as a guide to understand the motion and the movement and what can be done. And they're always amazing references when it comes to lighting and everything else. This at the end happened to be probably one of the most challenging sequences. And I remember my early conversations with Peter about this when he tried to explain the nunchuck, and I just couldn't get it for about 2 months or 3 months. I just couldn't get my head around the whole thing. And but the results were amazing. Yeah, it took the 6 months to get that, but the results were fascinating. Even now, looking at this with a gap of 6 months later, 7 months later, I just get a goosebumps. It's from remembering the journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely very, very fun to watch. You can see, like, when the camera's not on me, I'm so focused, I'm like watching the clip, and then I realize, oh right, we're doing a live stream. Just real quick, you were talking about the ingredients, right? That it's pretty much like, oh, you know, if you think about it, these are all just ingredients, and then, you know, you're taking it, you're following the recipe, and then you're, you know, fully baking something. In your experience, has there ever been missing ingredients? And when that happens, do you remedy that live time, like while Peter's still on set, or do sometimes you kind of have to, as they say in the business, just fix it in post?
The missing ingredients, the absolute ingredients, really you can approach it as a sort of you cooking the meal, and the process on set, the pre-production, and while you're shooting is just making sure, so you're growing the ingredients first. I think that's a pre-production. Then when you're shooting, you're prepping those ingredients for the final meal, and while you're starting the post, you just start cooking it. But they're missing in a post? Yes, they do, but they're missing for a simple reason, because sometimes the brief is different. Sometimes something happens on set that it's unpredictable before you start shooting it. So whether that's the weather, or whether that's different lighting or sun, or particular things that you just couldn't think of at the time when you plan the shots, or for any reasons we find something better, there is a better design, and we came up with a better plan and idea, and then those ingredients are not necessarily missing in that sense, but you just have to fix it in post, or rather just come up with you know, CGI solution to the problem.
And that's that within itself is kind of a skill that you, I'm sure, have to develop over time, right?
It is, and I was lucky, I think, on this show to really be involved with Peter there from the beginning, and then that gives you this opportunity to have the information. This is this prep time that it's usually about 3, 4, 5 months, depending on the size of the movie and amount of visual effects, and then digest information. And then when you go on set, you're obviously part of that. And then it gives you this a little bit of advantage of staying ahead of the curve, that you can maybe, you know, foresee some problems that are going to come down the line, and maybe prepare yourself sooner than later.
Well, thank you so much for that. I think now we can move on to Jesper, who also has some really awesome stuff to show. It's all been equally as amazing to look at all this, but Jesper, I believe you have some great reels and discussion for us as well.
Yeah, nothing that's gonna follow Alex's. I'm gonna caveat this with that I had to put this together myself, and I'm gonna talk over it. I noticed that Alex, we can hear Alex. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me at all?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we hear you. We hear you.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna follow up with what Peter was talking about, and Peter is the master. He mentioned about shooting plates and, you know, shooting things, and of course he did. So this is basically what he gave us. He shot about an hour of LA with a noddle head, just the way we used to do it back in the day, and we took this for Cypher's lair to try to put it together. And these are actually Peter's own like interpretations of that he put together and put in front of Louis. The next step we did is stitch it all together, his footage, try the different lighting scenarios, and talk about it. And this is very much the process. And we settle on this one. Apart from, lowering a building or whatever. But that was the methodology that Peter was talking about earlier. Just get the right footage and we run with it. There was a lot of more things that went into this, like twinkling lights. I'm showing this in slow motion because we did actually add that little device to Charlize's hip. Because that's the kind of stuff that you get asked to do. And then to expand on the same thing, the same way that Peter works, I'm going to show you a little bit of Rio. And I have to show you the plates in slow motion because they're really quick. But at least you get an idea. This is what Alex shot. And I'm gonna call you out here, mate. We're missing some palm trees in a few of these shots.
Well, I was busy having party with the rest of the crew and stuff. What can I say?
Hey, look. When Peter called it out, like with 3 weeks left, it was like, oh, I need fresh underwear. But anyway, Peter went to Rio, so I'm gonna try to explain how he planned this shoot. So you got Ipanema on the left. And the stage that you saw earlier, the blue screen, is basically based on this little part. So that's the stage in London where Alex forgot to put palm trees in. Thanks, dude. And the plan was always to film the left side, looking west at Ipanema. Sorry about the burn-ins, but I don't pay for free software when it's available. And Copacabana, but Peter asked us to put it together as both a stitch plate, but also as a bridge. And this is kind of what we came up with, and you don't need that much. You can have a basic look tab. That's going to be what sits between your background plates, the Pete shot, and your plate that was shot in Leavesden. And this is basically putting the stage and the location together. And by the time we're done, oh, of course, Louis lit it, or not Louis, the VP lit it with some fireworks. So I needed to find some good fireworks to put in the background. But this is kind of what we ended up with. And sorry, Paul, I need to thank you for the sky, actually. Is that Peter was happy with your sky, so we used it.
So, tell us about the palm trees. What happened? So you get the so you get the footage back. Palm trees aren't there. In a situation like that, obviously the remedy is putting in some palm trees, right? But you can't get everybody back together to film the scene again. I mean, I guess you could, but I'm assuming it would be very expensive. So what does the pipeline look like for something like that? First and foremost, pulling out our hair, we forgot the palm trees, but then the next part is the solution, right?
It is. And it wasn't very complicated because it was very obvious. It wasn't to Peter, but he can speak to that himself. It's a no one were missing them, but we needed them anyway for background. So we had them built, and my CG soup was, he pushed it a little bit extra. He had a feeling, that we're gonna need these palm trees. And I get a call from Peter, and he's like, Alex fucked up. That was the call. And I get it. Look, you can't film flying cameras around with palm trees in the way. So I called Alex and I told him you fucked up.
I mean, to be fair, Alex was supervising 2 helicopters crashing into each other above a freeway, right? So there was a lot going on.
Yeah. But I get the call from Peter. Lou has just noticed this. We're missing some palm trees. And I'm like, okay. Well, I think we can sort you out. And we did. And I would say, like our post did, we could kind of see it, and we were kind of ready for it. But it was not one of those obvious things, and that always happens. It always happens.
But it's always those things that you know the internet. They'll spot something that takes you out of the immersion like that. And so it's definitely a good catch for sure. And that also answers our previous question on, how do you deal with having to review each other's work even though you all are friends? Now we know. Now we know exactly how that call goes. It's very simple, straightforward, and to the point. I enjoy that a lot. So thank you for saying that with us.
And look, that's kind of one example of kind of the life in post. You get a lot of 911 calls. Louis is a demanding director, and he wants his film to be the best it can be. And there's always, Paul, you had one where, we kind of designed the flame it'd be a great idea to get the flame licking around the tires of the car as it goes down. I mean, this was never this is the spontaneity of kind of working on a great production like this, that, you can have these ideas and kind of realize them. But It does keep the boys up late at night, and
Oh yes, it does. Oh, yes.
yeah.
It's good keeping you on your toes. That's what it is, keeping you all on your
Yeah.
toes.
Yeah.
All right, so Jesper, thank you so much for that awesome breakdown. I think now we can pivot on over to Hugh.
Hey, yeah, so Bello worked on about 410 shots, I think, in total. So I think it's probably best to start with a little breakdown reel that we did. So we'll run the breakdown reel, and then I can have a little chat about it afterwards.
All right. The final elevator looked a little strange. What was that? That was an interesting one. Yellow and that was in the movie? I'm joking. It was the logo that was coming down.
Little
I could
panic
see
moment
that.
there, like, wait a minute, what have I added? It wasn't supposed to be seen.
No.
Oh, good.
Okay, so we saw a lot there. So why don't you
I've
go
got,
ahead and kind of walk us through it?
I've got a couple of slides. I mean, it's just clips from the breakdown that you've just seen, but maybe it will help to go through that, just to talk through a couple of the specifics on bits of what we did. So yeah, I guess the lift shot sequence. So our sort of working process for this would be basically start with backplates that were shot. Again, going back to what we talked about, making sure we're getting what we need from set. And this basically covered us for most of what we needed, which was obviously a huge help. Having a full environment, nicely lit, everyone's happy with. Our work started with painting out cables that we didn't need, painting out the actual lift that was in there that we were going to replace. So that would just give us a lovely clean base as a starting point. We then generally move into Unreal to do a layout pass, a sort of blocking pass. That would generally cover us for the whole sequence. We'd go through and we'd paste, we'd get the start and the end position of the lift. plan out the speed of travel and how that builds through the sequence, so we can just try and make a sequence that works, that everyone's happy with.
Hugh, can I ask, do you render everything in Unreal?
Depending on the sequence, in some cases we'll render straight out of Unreal and we'll push that straight into comp. In some cases we'll use Unreal just as a means of getting through layout, just because it's quick and can make pretty pictures while still being quick. But yeah, we mix it up, sort of use it for its best use case, really.
But you are basically like real-time rendering.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
wow.
You know, there's real-time and then there's real-time inverted commas. So in some cases, you know, we'll obviously it's quicker than traditional rendering, but it will, you know, take some minutes, frames, or some seconds a frame, depending on how we use up the settings. So, you know, we'll start with our real-time, we'll get nice quick passes out, and then we'll add all the bells and whistles, which will slow it down.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, obviously, you know, we'll do that pass. It will then become pushed through progressively with textures, LDEV, lighting, effects. But yeah, the staging pass was really helpful because it just helps get this back and forth with Peter, with Louis, and we can just figure out how the sequence is going to work and, you know, answer our questions as we go. Staging, I guess, would then get refined with animation. So, you know, we might have a close-up shot like this, our hero shot of the brakes. Again, it comes back to that storytelling. We would sort of figure out what the story is we want to tell in that the lift is braking. And then we would design our lift to help illustrate that story. You know, this isn't really how lifts actually brake. If you look at an actual brake and how it's designed, it's a bit more boring. So we've got to try and adapt and make it a bit more exciting for film and for this movie series. So yeah, we'd have a nice pass in animation. Obviously, then we push that through into lighting, texturing, and pass then through to effects simulation work for the moving cables, the dust, the brake sparks, just to start pulling it all together. There are a few shots that come up where maybe we don't have a specific backplate for it. So in that case, we would, it might have a moving camera. Maybe it was shot on set without a moving camera. And so we'd need to create a moving camera for it. So in that case, you know, we've got plates we can project. We've got a really good base to start with. So we can focus any build work in a very shot specific way. So we're not wasting time, not wasting money, which is obviously, you know, the words that the clients want to hear. I guess the other thing, so, you know, interior shots, we'd have a few shots on the interior of the lift as well. That was mostly shot practically. So our work would generally be cleanup of the special effects bullet hits and explosive rigs. We'd add the CG roof where there's, you know, continuity to be figured out for bullet holes, where we've got guards shooting from the top and hero characters shooting from underneath. And then obviously, you know, where we need to put a whizzing background coming past, we'd be adding the whizzing background, and having that nice blocking pass so we can figure out speeds and everything was crucial. So that was kind of that sequence. The tribunal briefing room sequence, a little bit different again. Quite an interesting one for us, fun creative challenge to figure out. First task was designing the environment. So, you know, I think it's probably fair to say to Peter, with him on the call, that I don't think anyone was hugely keen on the environment as shot, which was essentially an empty warehouse with some spotlights and some hanging screens. So we'd start with we'd start with concept art as you normally would for something like this. We'd figure out what it was we wanted to build. We'd take reference from elsewhere in the movie. In this case, it was the sort of black site prison where there was this sort of geometric, brutalist sort of set design, which looked lovely. So we thought, oh, we'll steal some of that and stick it in here because it just ties it all together. And then we would, added a nice floating platform, make it feel futuristic, and then play with the lighting a little bit. Main build for this was done in Houdini Solaris. I don't know if people want specific tech details, but why not? Just because it was nice and procedural. Obviously, we then top it up with some more traditional sort of Maya-based modeling for platform and screens. Again, we would try to use Unreal where we can, just for blocking the whole sequence. It would give us speedy outputs for layout, camera blocking. This whole sequence was had quite a lot of shots in it, and the camera was constantly spinning around. So really helpful to do that as a first pass. So having the ability to pop out between Unreal, back into Solaris, back into Unreal, was super helpful. And things like the screens as well. We'd have some shots where there was a practical screen in a position, but compositionally, maybe we wanted to adjust it a bit once you see the sequence as a whole. So being able to nudge them around for the whole sequence while you're watching it was really helpful. Getting things into comp, I suppose, after that, some of the things that we were super keen to keep were things like foot contact on floor. So we sort of designed our environment around that to try and help, mitigate interactive moments, which is always quite tricky to sell and get looking convincing. Other things that were tricky were things like the spotlights. So there were obviously spotlights on set that didn't necessarily shine onto anything in the new design of the environment. So, fair play to the prep team and the comp team for painting that out, in some cases over the top of characters. But that sort of goes back to what the other chaps were saying about, sometimes things change, sometimes things, you just have to come up with creative solutions to solve things, which is, part of the fun of the job. I say part of the fun of the job. I'm sure it's not huge amounts of fun for some people on the team, but collectively, let's say, part of the fun of the job. I guess a third sequence to talk about, just to give a bit of a breakdown. So the Antarctica sequence and the submarine, which is one of our big effects environments. So again, our icy environment, that was created. So this is an example of something that was created and rendered in Unreal. Again, I'm not trying to sound like an ad for the software, but at Bello, we do use it wherever we can and love it. But it lets us quickly block in mountain shapes. You can just bash some forms together at speed, jump around all the camera angles you've got, make sure the composition's working across those shots. Once we've got the base environment sorted, we would get our effects team involved, generating a library of effects sims, things like snowy dust being blown around, particulate in the air, things like that we can then sort of have as a little mix and match caches. Depending on the shot, we can, place them artistically to get that sort of Arctic feel that Peter and Louis were after. And then again, pass to comp, the magical comp team, to bring it all together and dress in some selective practical elements as well, just to help bring a bit more realism, which always helps. Throughout the sequence, some of our challenges would be things like lighting. It's a little bit of a juggling act, depending on when and where things were shot. So we'd be balancing close-up plate photography that maybe was shot in some more overcast conditions. And then we'd be matching that with a stronger sunlit. British weather is very changeable. So we'd have stronger sunlit lighting for the wide shots, particularly where the submarine was sort of crashing through. So it just becomes about trying to find smart solutions again to try and bridge the gap. There's a certain amount of plate relighting that you can do before it breaks. You can push it so far. This shot's probably quite an example. They kind of light them enough that it feels like they're not on the blue screen anymore, but without forcing lighting on characters that shouldn't have it. And another thing I did across this sequence to try and help mitigate that was, start introducing these light sprinkling of clouds above. So where we'd have wide shots, we'd just introduce a convenient cloud that might, on shots like this, looking down, maybe we'll have a little bit of cloud cover, just casting some interesting shadows across the also. We try and kind of get away with it where we can. And tricks like that will generally get us to where we need to be. They might not be perfect, but they'll hopefully be close enough that it doesn't jar or become too distracting. Another big focus actually on this frame, talking about the stark sunlight, was just making sure that we've got enough detail. So in what could essentially be a fairly featureless environment, it's important to pick up some shadows and some specks off the snow, so it didn't read as sort of unrealistically plain. Again, in real life reference, you look at your nature documentaries, and there are sometimes just completely plain environments. So we've got to try and avoid being too CG feeling. So it's easy enough to do things like throwing down some rocks and bigger chunks of stuff, but on the wide expanses of empty, because we're in Unreal, we could use the decals tool and just throw in some cracks, position them around, make something that works across a bunch of shots. So that was quite a refreshing way of working. Not necessarily having to jump around between different departments and wait for a DMP to be done and then pass it back through to lighting or back through to comp. So it's just quite nice as a generalist approach to be able to have a problem, come up with a solution. Yeah, I like it. Like I said at the start, that's kind of my background was working through generalist, so I like that way of working. What else to talk about? Submarine, in case anyone interested, was based on a cooler class nuclear-powered attack submarine with some modifications for artistic license. We had to make sure we matched to a partial set build. So we had a back and forward, again, with Peter. So we'd modeled the submarine, have a back and forward with the set build team to make sure we can match what was built. And obviously there's limitations to what can be used on set and how big it can be. So again, just making sure we've got this back and forward to have a model, start with something realistic, and then adapt it based on the situation. So that constant dialogue is hugely important. Our effect simulation work, just to talk about the submarine coming through the ice. So again, we required a setup that worked across multiple cameras. We had a few shots where the sub is cresting through. You know, again, going back to time and money, we had to keep simulation time to a minimum and make sure we were consistent between our shots. So we ran an animation pass and the simulation as just one overlength piece. So it covered the whole action beat. We try and, looked at reference, figured out what the action was, how it breaks through ice, how long it takes, ran it as one simulated action beat that we could, show Peter, show Louis, make sure they're happy with what's going on. And then we break it up into the shots and, find our camera positions. Main challenge, I suppose, in that sense was finding that sweet spot between reality and, let's say, Fast and Furious amped reality. When you're watching a movie like this, you want to feel more of an oomph, you want to feel more of an impact. So we'll always start with the real references. And in this case, a submarine going through ice is quite calm and quite gentle. You get a sort of gentle disturbing of ice chunks, which does look cool, but it doesn't have that energy that we want. So we had to try and put the energy and find that sweet spot. Yeah, I suppose that's really it. Oh, I guess going back to it, the thing that we did do, so once running the simulations, we would then try and find where we can, any real life reference, any real life elements of drips, of water running. Again, thankful to our amazing comp team, we would just start dressing in, trying to save where we can. So not simulating absolutely everything, try and dress in some real life elements just to get that realism, the tight spec that helps it not feel like a model. So yeah, it's always nice to try and take reference from reality as much as, we still want to celebrate the beauty of CG. Don't want to shy away from CG. But yeah, I suppose that gives a bit of a rundown on the work that we did.
There's a lot to unpack there. So I have a couple of questions for you. Number one, amazing. Very, very fun to look at and kind of get all of that insight. The first question that I have is the fake break. So obviously certain parts that you were working on, there's a concept artist, like you were talking about the warehouse, concept artist works on that, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. For the fake break, does a concept artist also do that part, or is that kind of under your team of like, there's a break here, here's the cable, there's supposed to be a break?
In terms of the lift, the elevator?
Yes.
So I think concept team for that, we worked on the design of the elevator. So the top of the elevator, that was, completely created. So we grabbed from life reference. We knew, I think the key thing with that sort of stuff is understanding what the point we're trying to tell from a story perspective. We could put absolute reality in there, what a lift shaft looks like. It's generally supported by cables on either side to give it some extra strength. But to tell that clean story of Cypher, the character, she aims a gun, she sees a weak point, she's like, right, I need to solve the situation, shoots her gun, and she, the story point is hitting the cable, breaking the cable. So to then have a bunch of other support cables around there, that's not the most efficient way of telling that story. It's kind of like, doesn't make logical sense to just have this one cable, but that made story sense. So those kind of decisions are, interesting to explore. And it always comes down to what tells the story best, what will give the audience the best understanding, so they don't have to go, I don't really understand what happened there. The shots are quite quick. You need to understand it right in the moment.
Yeah, and I would hope that if you're a Lyft operator watching, that you'd understand that in a movie like this, you know, they're going to
Don't
take
look too
some
closely.
royalties.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be really funny if they were like that. Those helicopters, I'm fine with that, but the lift sequence,
Yeah,
I don't know.
that would
you know?
not support that way. 2 people in that lift.
So then you were also mentioning challenges. Obviously, you know, anyone that's worked in any artistic capacity, you have white. White's going to reflect all kinds of colors. So I'm sure you see that come in and you go, wow, that's it's going to be a challenge. There's going to be a lot of work with that. Generally, with shots that come in, what are kind of the shots that when you see them, you go, okay, that's going to require a lot of work?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. There's obviously the big ones that you can spot straight away, where there's, you know, a big robot claw that we need to design and create and animate, or there's these big wide shots of a submarine crashing through ice. Those are the ones that we know straight away. That's a lot of work. We need to talk about this and figure it out and get started now. But then it's funny, you get the other shots, kind of like I was saying with the other Antarctic sequence shots, where it's just a lighting problem to solve. The shot in itself isn't a hugely complex shot, but there's some really specific task within it that is a challenge. And it's sometimes those ones that end up going right to the end of the show. You know, you'd think it would be the big shots. In some cases it is. But often it's the small shots that sneak up on you, that you think, there's something to solve there, but you don't realize how big it is until you get into it.
Yeah.
But that's, where you rely on your team around you. And that's always been the case with this industry. I think, you're always one of a part. And I think being surrounded by incredibly artistic people, I know I don't have all the answers. I can offer my suggestions and I'll try and guide people down a route, and be a conduit with Peter and make sure he's getting what he needs. But ultimately, it's about collaboration. And if people have an idea, we're always open to listening to it and figuring out how problems get solved. And I remember when before becoming a VFX Soup, one of the things I loved about dailies and talking with your supervisors was that feeling of having a cool idea, what you think is a cool idea, and being like, oh, I'm not sure whether to mention this or not, but I think, wouldn't it be really cool if we did X, Y, Z? And then they go, actually, yeah, that would be really cool. And you're like, oh, I just put an idea into a movie. This is very exciting. And that's always stuck with me as something I love about the job. So I'm always keen to, let people explore that. And if anyone's got any idea, I'm all open to listening to it. Yeah, I love that about this job.
It's awesome. I mean, it sounds like you also enjoy being part of a team and work well in a team, which, for those of you out there, teamwork makes the dream work.
Sure does.
Okay. Thank you so much, Hugh. So we will now be moving on to Paul. Paul, I know you got some awesome stuff for us, and I can't wait. Everything's been so much fun just watching and hearing y'all break down. So by all means, take it away. Not sure we can hear you. Go ahead and give that another tip. Yes. Now we can.
No worries. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about a couple of the sequences that we worked on at ILM. The first of which is Rio Race. This sequence was run from our Vancouver studio team. It takes place in Rio, Brazil, and was shot in an airfield in the UK. Our task was to recreate the BO beachfront and some of the iconic scenery like Christ the Redeemer statue and Sugarloaf Mountain in the background. Before I talk through, we've got some breakdowns. So, James, if you could play clip 1 for me, that'd be great. Cool. James, if you could load my slide presentation back. Thank you very much. The production supplied drone footage and tiles of the beachfront in Brazil as reference. Our artists began by using online maps to get the footprint of the area, so modeling scale was accurate. This asset was built by a generalist team covering 7 full city blocks, the beachfront, surrounding mountain ranges, and the Bay Area using 3ds Max and rendered using V-Ray. In this example, you can see there was a location background plate for Rio, which is the top left there. And then you can see the model that was built there in the grayscale. This was including trees, boats, water surface, cars, crowds, and effects simulated fireworks. Okay, here's another angle showing more of the CG environment. The hero car's floor and some of the dress background was kept with additional CG cars lining the raceway. The additional cars were built by a digital model shop using scans from production and lit and rendered by a lighting department in Katana and RenderMan. As the distant environment was built in CG, it gave the generalist artist the ability to adjust the composition, and sometimes just a small positional change to the layout can make a big difference, like just getting a glimpse of a famous landmark. In this shot, the plate from the charger POV, right, top left, let me just click here. So the shot actually had to change slightly where the car needed to be moved over to the left. And this is kind of where we bring in what Peter was talking about earlier in terms of the camera array. So what we could do is we could use the other camera's view and stitch them together to make one new plate as a shot. The camera car on the left and the Canon have been removed by a prep team once we've combined that shot together. And then we've added in this foreground element over the top, which was this one here. So we've taken that and added our CG over the top of the car for the reflections and anything that's going on in this scene. You'll be able to see like there's a reflection of the pyro there. So we also match moved this car, which allowed our effects team to add pyro effects and sparks to the, and obviously because we match moved it, it meant that we had the right collision. Right, there we go. So James, could you play clip 2 for me, please? Right, if you can, there you go. This is a really fun and dynamic shot in the sequence with the camera moving through and around the cars. From the shoot, we had 5 separate takes without motion control of the cars and the characters on blue screen. These were shot at different times in the studio, and the camera team repeated the move using markers and measurements as a guide. Our layout team tracked all the takes and placed these into one 3D scene to recapture through a new camera, joining and stitching them together to make one continuous shot. We added CG cars over the top to get the correct lighting from the animated environment whipping past on the metal and the glass. Because of the amount of parallax with the dynamic camera move, the full CG environment was used to help get a sense of speed and movement. Our effects team added debris and atmos that you can see getting kicked up and moving across the cars. Our compositor put all the elements together from the departments, adding in all the effects you expect from optical photography, like defocus, grading, and lens flares. I particularly like the lens flares. So the dam crest sequence was run from our London studio team and takes place at the hydroelectric dam with Dom trapped between 2 tankers. Here are some breakdowns. James, if you could play clip 3, please. Okay, here are 2 examples where the backgrounds were replaced. The production provided us with LiDAR photographic reference of the hero location. The surrounding canyon was rendered by our generalist team using the provided photogrammetry and projecting it onto geometry. This always needs a bit of a cleanup, but it works really well because the photos we had matched the lighting conditions required. The dam was built by a digital model shop and textured by painting areas of detail from the photography. This was then rendered in our lighting department with Katana and RenderMan. The car was also match moved and rendered for the environment reflections and continuity, or replaced with a CG version if the action needed to be different. And that can be kind of just that the car didn't do something perfectly natural on a wire, and we had to make it move correctly. Some of the shots were filmed at the hero location without vehicles. Our animation team used the CG versions of the car and tankers in these shots. Our digital model shop built the two tankers ready for rigid destruction by making sure they were double-sided and closed separate objects. The first pass of the movement was handled by the animator, and then the effects simulation team took over as the tankers nearly touched, using the physics to continue the path to the crash. Along with the hard surfaces of the tankers, there's fuel, liquid on fire, and pyro fire were also simmed. The effects work was carried out in Houdini by our effects team. An important aspect of the fire chasing the car was that it needed to keep developing as it moved. We incorporated extra internal explosions, simulations, throwing more fire forward at moments, forming finger-like tendrils, bounding and giving the impression that it was reaching the car. Variation was achieved by adding additional invisible geometry as collision objects into the dam for the liquid to hit. Simulations were separated and rendered in deep layers, allowing us to make changes without adjusting other layers. The effects was rendered in Mantra by our effects team, and the interactive lighting by our lighting department using VDBs supplied by effects. James, if you could play clip 4, please. Cool. Well, this is the shot that you saw a test for earlier with Peter, that is showing you the camera moving around the people. So obviously we had the chance here to update the iconic engine fly-through from the very first Fast and Furious. Dom and Little B were shot in half the car on a blue screen stage using the motion control camera. As this camera would go through them, they were actually shot separately for safety. So we had two different plates of Vin and Little B. We needed to build out the entire environment and the car and use several animated CG camera takeovers. As this was a long shot, to simplify, we decided to break it down into sub-shots, working on 3 shorter sections. Section 1 ran from outside the car to the NOS button press. We set about match moving the cameras and combining the separate blue screen shots of Vin and Little B together to make them one shot. Once we had this, the animator could begin moving the car on the dam. And adding a new camera starting further away and pushing forward quickly and lining it up to meet the original camera's path. So so just as the camera goes into the car, we switch back to the camera from the photography. Our effects team handled the fire inside, surrounding the car and breaking through the glass. Okay. Some of the smaller effects was built by a compositor. For example, the embers inside the car were generated with Nuke's particle system. Most of the inside of the car was replaced with the CG version, keeping the seats and actors from the photography. As the interactive fire changed the look throughout the car, we match-moved the actors using their digi doubles. This allowed us to generate lighting maps and grade the photography in comp. I think Hugh was saying it earlier, you can only push photography so far. So obviously we pushed it quite extreme. But in this example, in the top right, you can see the lighting difference between this one. If I can select it, this one here, and this is the plate photography, this one in the center. So it makes a big difference. And really, lighting is the key to embedding everything seamlessly. As the camera got to Dom's close-up, we took over the camera again, animating the move onto Dom's arm. This wasn't possible with the motion control camera, as there was a limitation with the minimum focus distance. Our model team built a CG Vin Diesel arm, which allowed us to make a more dynamic camera move, getting closer than was possible on set. On the arm, we used a high-res skin textures, procedural skin displacement, and a layer of groom for the hair. The arm was rigged with additional shapes for tendons, veins, and muscles that the animator could trigger and key. The benefit of this section becoming a CG takeover was that we could really push the camera dynamically and change the camera's focal length as the lens changes from 19 millimeters to 10 millimeters when we're diving into the engine, giving that macro close-up look. Once Dom clicks the button, we're into the NOS story, the start of our second subshot. We started this section by researching how NOS can be delivered to a V8 engine, which actually I found a lot of fun, working out how an engine goes together. As a lot of the timing was dependent on distance, it made sense for the animator to build the model of the engine as they blocked it out. So geometry and animation could be adjusted quickly. Some hero sections were chosen to slow down and take in the environment, like the combustion chamber, which is being shown here, just slow enough to get a sense of the space and the reaction. Once animation was close to being approved, the model team built over the animator's geometry, adding in more detail. Texture and lighting team then started looking at the look development. The engine started off quite clean, like the stills above, with more grunge and texture variation in the metals added for the final. You can see some of the grunge and signs of use in this slide. The effects team simulated the NOS in gaseous form to ignition and blue fire exhaust, hitting the same timing as the approved animator's blockout. Our lighting team used the effects to light the scene, but there was also a set of lights that followed the camera's POV like an endoscope camera. Comp added extra distortion, enhancing this endoscopic look. Third subshot is where we get pushed out of the exhaust with the blue NOS flame onto the CG dam, watching the car disappear into the fire. The compositor across these three shots was tasked with joining the overlapping sections together into one master shot. There we go. Any questions?
Quite a few. First and foremost, that was awesome. Thank you so much for that. I think we'll probably start with one question specifically for you, and then we can open up and kind of wrap up for our questions. So one of the big things I can obviously see just out of the gate of being a supervisor for a lot of these VFX is, for me at least, getting lost in the spectacle, right? So as the tankers collide and then it goes down the dam, and as that shot is happening, there's a small teeny tiny lens flare that happens, right? But in order to do that, you have to be so analytical with your approach when you're looking at the scene, because at some point that lens flare is not there, right? And adding that in, having that kind of mindset, how does that, I mean, in a general sense, how does that all work? Do you have somebody on your team that's suggesting it? Sometimes it's somebody on your team, or are you looking at it and being like, well, technically, if we're here, now the sun is cresting over the top of the dam, so obviously we would need that lighting. For that, how do you remove yourself from the spectacle and look at it so analytically?
Well, yeah, I would say in a lot of cases, kind of Hugh touched on this, you're part of a big team, and you sit and you watch these shots over and over again. So you actually get to see this shot many times in different kind of stages. So you kind of decide that you might do some of those things during that time. Maybe someone suggests it, or maybe you go, actually, let's look at the real footage, because I suspect possibly on the real plate, there was probably a lens flare already there that maybe we had cleaned up and then we need to bring back. So I think you've just got to look at it from a kind of a place of, well, what would happen? Would a lens flare appear there? And to tell you the truth, I think lens flares do get added, even though a lens flare wouldn't be possible at that point. But you've got to think of it as it's being shot through a camera, through an optical piece of glass, and hitting a sensor. Would it happen? And that's the first stage. Then the next stage is, actually, it will just look really cool, so I'm going to put a lens flare there. That's always the kind of the way I go through it anyway. Can it be done? Would it happen? Will it look cool?
The rule of cool, as it is. I like that. Okay, so we can bring everyone back in. If you have any questions, we have a ton of. Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, so Yeah, you want to. Oh, my dog is just in the way. I'm sorry.
That's the secret. The dog is the secret.
The dog is the secret.
Yeah.
Throw the ball. To continue on Paul's line of thought, I would say whatever works. Whatever works.
Yeah. Whatever works. Whatever. Yeah. Again, it's you know the for me when I watch it, the only thing that I think is, man, that's just so cool. And I think that's the takeaway that you want when somebody goes and sees it in the theater, right? You don't want somebody looking at it and be like, that plate doesn't look right. You want somebody to be like, man, that was so much fun to watch, and just you feel part of it, you're immersed, and that's what I get out of it. So I'm assuming that you all have that vision. It's just also the work aspect of it, the other side of it is so interesting to me, because I would look at it, see a giant explosion and be like, that's it, that's great. Giant explosion sounds good. But, obviously there are a lot more nuances that come into it, which, makes sense on why I'm not the VFX supervisors and you all are.
No, but it's nuances that people like Peter only know about. We're still learning.
So adding into that, a lot of people were curious on, you all worked on FastX. You all did a bunch of different things on it. Was there anything that you did on it that afterwards you took and you go, oh, I'm going to apply that going forward, just in my career, in my workflow, in my pipeline, anything along those lines? Because I know Peter was mentioning before, one of the great things about having everyone on a team is that everyone kind of touched different stuff in different projects. And one of the reasons why that's really great is because you get these different perspectives on certain things and troubleshooting stuff and whatnot. So what was the thing that you took away from FastX that you now use on future projects, if anything? And this is up for anybody to answer.
I'm waiting for the guys to answer that.
Well, I was going to say, I think depending on the project you're working on, I think there's always things you'll pick up and learn. It's an ever-evolving industry. There's no one way of doing things. You might learn something on another project. You're like, oh, wicked, that worked really well. And then come, a year's time or year and a half time on your next show, technology is updated since then. So that thing that you were holding on to is like, I'm going to use this now. Maybe it's null and void. Maybe you dissect it and go, actually, this little aspect of it would still work, or this creative ththing we figured out. So I think, it's always changing. It makes sense to try and use things that work, but also you want to look for the new solutions. You want to find, new ideas, new solutions. That was very unspecific. Sorry.
I think
it works for me.
I think a lot of kind of our reviews, and whenever I was talking to Peter in reviews and looking at our shots, I think the main takeaway for me was just how important storytelling is. And Peter really pushed that and says, right, every shot has to tell a story. And, I really bought into that, and I really feel that's the right way to go about all the visual effects shots. Just make sure they tell the correct story, and that's the best thing to push forward.
If I may say something.
Oh, yes, please.
Then for me, it was like, I'm really sorry. I have a dog and a daughter in the background, really annoying me. But anyway, just working with Peter again, and like I said before, he's the master, and that's the key. Like we learn so much from each other, and it's how we progress. It's how we do our jobs.
And it seems like that teamwork and that camaraderie really, you can see it, right? We see it in the end product. It works really well. I think we're closing out here, but as we close out, I know we did mention a couple of times that the story is so important, right? To what you do and what you're, working on, whether it be a brake line or a palm tree. Would you say that is the heart of your work, or is there something else that you say the heart of my work is really this? And this will be our parting question. This was one of the questions we got from the very top, and so I'd like to end on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you approach each project learning from everybody that you work with and past projects. So I think the heart and soul of it is really coming from Louis, because he drives the whole aesthetic for all other HODs. He has to approve everything that is being presented to him. So I think the heart of the film, really, of Fast 10 is really Louis. He, integrated with every facet of the film. And for me, his vision, kind of really stood out as being, slightly different from the other directors, but at the same time keeping with the same sort of franchise style. And that's kind of reflected in everything that we do. It was reflected in the way Steve Wyndham went about lighting his shots, Jan creating the sets, and obviously the visual effects as well.
And say that you were the driving force, Peter. You were absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Jesper. You're very kind.
You made this movie, mate.
I want to thank you all so much for your time, and you're always welcome back to talk about anything else that you all are going to be working on. I'm sure everybody would be so excited to hear about any other projects. Thank you all so much for watching and participating and all your great questions. And thank you so much again to our panelists. And until next time, if you're curious about what Gnomon is going to be doing and other great live streams, make sure to follow us on our socials at Gnomon_school. And if you're curious at what Gnomon can do for you, go ahead and make sure to send us an email at info@gnomon.edu. Y'all, if you have anything else you'd like to say, please, well, as we close out.
Gnomon, yeah, from my side, guys, is thank you, everyone. I think that I grew up with Gnomon, going back to late 90s and beginning of Gnomon school, and Mr. Alex Alvarez, remember like yesterday when he started. So thank you, everyone, and it's amazing to see the school still keep going after 20 plus years and helping the students to learn and educate and us contributing back to the industry and sharing the experience from what we learned. Thank you for inviting us and having us on the show.
One other thing to add, I was going to say, we were chatting in the offline chat, but at the very head of this meeting, the reel that was played, it looked awesome. I mean, I'm not sure whose work in entirety was involved there, but it's a great selection of work. It was really interesting to watch through. So
absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
that's student work.
Really good.
You're in, thank you all so much for your kind words, and I mean, we'll see you next time. We'll see you all next time.
See you next time.
Thanks very much.
Good luck.
Thank you,
Good luck
everyone.
with all your careers.